recipient of the Foundation's Distinguished Service Award. Paul is a multiple Paul Harris Fellow and a Bequest Society member. I present to the Rotary Club of Winder, Dr. Paul Matthews.
Greetings to folks on the computer and to those here who are present. Our Rotary Club is also doing hybrid meetings right now, and I know that's sometimes a challenge. So please let me know if there's anything that's not working right from the tech side, so that I can try to talk in a way that everybody can hear me. So, and I appreciate y'all letting me come to talk about the foundation. As Bill mentioned, I'm with the Custom City of Rotary Club, but I also at the district level am involved as part of our foundation team. So Bill, as your foundation chair, wanted me to share a little bit of information about the foundation, but I also recognize that this is probably one of those topics that when you hear somebody say, we're going to talk about the Rotary Foundation, that's a good meeting to have something else come up that you missed by accident. So I'm glad to get to talk a little bit. I'm not going to do a PowerPoint. I'm going to share a couple of thoughts that I've got, a couple of experiences I've had with the foundation, and also see if y'all have some questions. And so,
Paul, what was that you just said before that? You're not going to what?
I'm not going to use the PowerPoint. I'm also going to try not to bore you, but you have to see whether that works or not. So by the way, I'm glad to also get a chance to be here, because while I love being in Athens today and tomorrow are both graduation day, as was mentioned, and so traffic is a little bit crazy there right now. So I'm glad to get to be out for a bit. So one of the anecdotes that I sometimes share with the kids in my scout troop when I'm trying to do like a Scoutmaster minute with them is one that I thought I could share with y'all here for today also, and that's this. There was once a man who was a preacher, and he and his family were on vacation. And their custom was that when they'd go on vacation, they'd look and see if there was maybe a little country church or someplace that didn't have a full-time pastor that he could go and lead worship for. And so sure enough, they found one, and the congregation was really happy to have him come in and be a guest speaker. And as they went in, the preacher and his son saw there was a collection box there, so he put in $5, sort of like with y'all's tickets here, right? So put in his $5, went and had a nice sermon, had a good opportunity. At the end of the church session, one of the members came up and said, "Thank you so much for talking with us today. It's our custom to give visiting preachers anything that was in the collection box." So he opened up the collection box and turned it upside down, and out came that $5 bill that he had put in, and that was it. And so the son looked at his dad and said, "Dad, we should have put in more." Right? So it doesn't quite top your joke. But the point with that, of course, is the same thing with the Rotary Foundation as with our membership in Rotary, right? The more we put into it, the more we're going to get out of it. And if we don't put anything into it, we're also not going to get as much out as we might wish that we had. So, when we talk about the foundation, your club is doing a great job with supporting the foundation. I looked at the data that our past district governor, Scott Parmenter, had put out, and I believe he says that your club is presently at $120 per capita for donations to the Rotary Foundation this year. So that is awesome. That is a big support. So I've got a couple of questions, I guess, for y'all to make this a little bit more interactive as well. And one is, what happens to the money that we give to the foundation? Does anybody have a good sense of where that money goes, or what it does, or why we're giving that $120 each in your case to the Rotary group? This can be somebody on Zoom, but not Jerry Pivot, because Jerry is, of course, in our club, but he also knows all the answers to what I'm going to ask you today. So, what do you think? I mean, what happens to our money when we donate?
You can invest it in worthwhile causes.
Okay.
Rotary supports.
So it goes to worthwhile causes that Rotary supports, and it also does get invested, as you mentioned. In fact, it gets invested for 3 years. So that money that we give, they take, and for 3 years, it gets invested, hopefully generates interest that covers some of the administrative fees, all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of those 3 years, what happens to it then? How does it get to those good causes?
We apply for foundation grants. Help me out here, folks. And hopefully we get it, and we get and we match whatever we get from the foundation. So the money, a lot of it comes back to us.
Yeah, so what happens is 50% of that money that comes out of our District 6910 giving comes back to District 6910. And of that money that comes back to us, we actually save half of it for district level grants. And in our district, we're a little bit different than most districts. Most districts, the district leadership decides what they're going to do with that money and what projects to support. In our district, the district leadership says, we're going to give that back to the clubs through the process of applying for those district grants. And I think I saw in Zach TV that y'all actually had 3 sets of district grants that you got this year. Is that right, Mr.
Yes.
President?
Yes, sir.
It looked like there was something that was working with the Center for Innovative Teaching, as I recall.
Yes, sir.
And there was, let's see where I wrote this down. Also, you got some of the food pantry truck distribution and some food bags. So some of the food projects going on.
Yes, sir.
And so that money is money that is coming from what people have given through the foundation. So half of that money comes back and goes out to those district grants. The other half gets used for the global grant side of things. And those are international projects that are $30,000 or more of total things. And so since I was involved for a couple of years as the global grants chair as well, that's also an area that I want to make sure that y'all know at least a little bit about, because that's harder to sort of see from the club perspective that we're putting, that we're engaging in it. But some of that money goes for things like the global grant scholarships, which are paid for somebody from our district to go do a graduate program in another country. And they're getting a $30,000 scholarship to be able to do that through global grants. So we've had a lot of people who have done international public health degrees. We've had people that are focused on community development, agriculture, a lot of different cool areas that they've been able to be involved in through that. We also have a number of projects that have been funded as what are called vocational training teams, which is sending a group of professionals to another country to either get or give training around certain areas. And so our district governor Tina has a long track record of doing that with the Alliance for Smiles program. They're doing pilot lift repair surgery and surgical training teams in other countries. And then there's also the humanitarian type grants that get funded in other spots. And we've actually had some of our clubs in the near Forsyth area have worked together over the last couple of years with some clubs in India to do projects that relate to water and sanitation, specifically putting in blocks of restroom facilities in schools in some of the communities in India that did not have them otherwise. So all of these are some of the ways that we sort of leverage our money to be able to do things. And all of these have to fit in the Rotary Foundation priority areas. So what are our priority areas? Y'all know what some of those are? What are the focus areas, the things that we're going to especially spend it on these large scale projects? We have to be in these buckets.
Education and literacy, the environment.
Okay. Basic education and literacy is definitely one of those. Yes.
The environment.
The environment is going to be a
It's a
new
new
one as of this upcoming Rotary year. Yes, that's going to be exciting. So there's that's not a standalone one, but there are several that relate to that. So in terms of at the global level, disease prevention and treatment is one of them. That relates to some extent to that. Mother and child health, basically, so maternal and child health. So water and sanitation are also a big one, like the project that's going on in India. Community and economic development is sort of a big, a fairly broad topic, but that's one of the areas also that things to fall in. And y'all know also, I think, that polio eradication is one of the big Rotary projects worldwide. So our district I think we, I'll double check my cheat sheet here, but I think we gave around $55,000 in our district designated funds, our DDX, the money that comes back to our district, went to polio eradication. And I don't know if y'all saw past district governor Bill Strickland, Bill Strickland's presentation on polio. For some of y'all at the virtual district conference, did you see that one? It's really actually a little bit amazing when you look at what's happened with polio progress worldwide. You know that there's polio right now endemic in only 2 countries, right? And those 2 are Pakistan and Afghanistan. So far, in this entire year, there's only been one wild case in each of those two countries. Now, as PDG Bill mentioned, that's also because the transmission picked up a lot in the summertime and we're not there yet. So it would be very unlikely that those are going to just be the only cases that we see for the whole year. But there are actually several hundred cases of polio that still happen all around the world. A lot of that, though, is from the sort of recirculating virus. So it's not like the wild polio virus, but it's like if there's things in the water and sanitation system, it can get transmitted to other people through that way. It tends to not be a very severe case to get it that way, but it is still a case of transmission. And on the positive front, the entire continent of Africa has now been considered free of polio as of last year. And that's a huge accomplishment, obviously. So,
Matthews, can I ask you a few questions about this?
Sure.
How long have you been a Rotarian?
I have been a Rotarian since 1997.
Okay, so you've seen the polio eradication. That's Rotary. That's what we do. How has that gone? Like when you first joined Rotary, and if any other older Rotarians would like to pitch in, I'd love to know. Like Africa, no longer it's polio free, right?
Yeah.
What was it when you first joined?
Well, it wasn't polio free at that point, that's for sure. But yeah, if you go to the website that is endpolionow.org, one of the things that they've got on there is actually listing by country what years they were declared polio free. So I didn't realize, so I was looking at that. The U.S. wasn't declared polio free until 1979. And so, I mean, I got a polio vaccine as a kid. Today, our kids don't have to do that, right? Because we're not going to catch polio here locally. But yeah, when it started as a Rotary priority was really in the 1980s, and so I was not a Rotarian yet at that point. But I also feel like it's been something that we hear a lot about, and then we don't hear as much about it, and it's pretty challenging because sort of feel like, oh my gosh, haven't we done this yet? But the reality is it takes a lot of monitoring, it takes a lot of effort. There are always new kids being born who haven't been vaccinated. And then with the pandemic, of course, there was a pretty big disruption this year in terms of some of the immunization drives and other things that were going on.
I remember a couple of years ago, we had the foundation the foundation presentation. It's exciting to think where Rotary's going in the next couple of years. Once we get to that point where polio is eradicated, where does Rotary International, where do we pivot to and go next?
Yeah, I think that's a great question and an exciting one for sure to think about what could be next. There is a new project that some of y'all might have seen in your Rotary magazine this month. They have this grants of scale or programs of scale grants where they're doing a lot more money to basically like one big thing a year. And this year, what they're trying to do is to eradicate malaria out of one of the countries in Africa entirely through a combination of education, through mosquito nets, all kinds of stuff like that. So,
Excellent.
that's an example of the sort of thing that hopefully we can continue to be involved with for sure.
Yes, sir.
Let's see, what else did I want to mention to y'all? Oh, I think a couple things to mention. As Bill said in the introduction, I've actually had a chance to go around to some different parts of the world with Rotary. And to me, that's one of my favorite parts. I got tapped when I had only been a Rotarian for a year to lead a district team that went to Argentina. And that was probably just because I happened to speak Spanish and was a Rotarian and should take off for 4 weeks to do that. But that was a really, really cool opportunity to get to see what does Rotary look like in Argentina. And I can tell you, by the way, it involves a lot more red wine and barbecue than what we have the pleasure of arguing. So
We apologize.
That's okay, this week is great. But so getting to see, a couple Rotary meetings, doing sort of like a friendship type exchange opportunity where we could share what was going on in Georgia with people in another part of the world was really impactful. And sadly, in my opinion, the Rotary Foundation doesn't fund those kinds of exchange programs anymore. But we do have other ways that we can also continue to get involved with people from other countries, right? So, for instance, not only are there things like the Global Grant Scholarships that send students, but there's also a youth exchange program. I think y'all know about the GRSP, which is unique here in Georgia, and that's not funded through the Rotary Foundation, but youth exchange is an opportunity in most normal years. This year, I think they're doing virtual exchanges, but where you can have a high school age person go for a couple of weeks to go to a whole different country, and then a child from that family that hosts them comes and lives with you for a couple of weeks as well. I had one of my Boy Scouts do that back in, I think it was 2007 or so. And it was a really interesting experience, because he was, not very outgoing. He was, from a fairly conservative family. And he went to France for the summer and came back with his hair a completely different color, speaking French. And he ended up then, that literally transformed the trajectory of the rest of his career. He went and studied in Europe for several years to do college there. He's in a job where he is now using his multilingual skills. And that was literally just from talking with him and him saying, it would be cool if I could go to another country, but we can't really do it through, we can't afford to do it through some of the more traditional exchange programs. So something like that is a cool way to think about getting involved. Most of our clubs don't have the interest or the capacity to actually like write an entire global grant. That happens very rarely, and it usually takes a couple of years to get it done because you have to have those collaborations and partnerships with people in other countries. But we can still take part in those global grants even if we're not the originating club. And so one of the ways that we've been trying to do that as a district these last couple of years is through what's called HandWash, which is a non-acronym because it doesn't actually spell the things that it supposedly is saying. But HandWash is I have to read that because it is not a good acronym. It is the Haiti National Clean Water Sanitation and Health Strategy, which to me is HundWash rather than HandWash. But anyway, so what HandWash really is it is a multinational attempt through Rotary, but also through government and non-government organizations to tackle some of the water and sanitation challenges in Haiti. The infrastructure there is not in good shape. It does not work for the most part. And so they're trying to figure out sustainable ways to build that in so that it will not just be another example of throwing money at something and then walking away. And, unfortunately, I can tell you part of the challenge that we've had as Rotary is that challenge of throwing money at things and then walking away. I went as part of a group that got to go to Zimbabwe back in 2004 as part of a project that we had funded. We put $40,000 into a community there called Machinjika, which is near Harare. And it was a great idea in the sense that the idea of the project was it's a rural community where people are basically doing subsistence level farming. They might have a 1 acre plot that belongs to their family, and they're not in the cash economy at all because of that. They're just growing sort of subsistence level food. So the idea was to have them get education and training and support from the local Rotarians and the local university to be able to then essentially use their land holdings to be able to form a corporation that they were shareholders of, to pool the land together to be able to do larger scale commercial farming of things like sunflowers and other cash crops and enter the cash economy. It was really well thought out, had a lot of great ideas, a lot of support. The Rotarians there said, yes, we'll do it. Our district said, yes, we'll help fund it. The Rotary Foundation helped fund it. We got there and they had one successful planting and bought a tractor. And then that was it. That was the entirety of the success, because what happened was the conditions there were so bad in terms of the hyperinflation and the lack of access to things that we take for granted, like fuel. They had a tractor, but there was no fuel for it. Right? You couldn't buy diesel fuel anywhere in a reliable way. They missed the planting season for the second year, and so then suddenly there is nothing there. So there was a big cash infusion. They loved that. They were able to pay for their kids' education. They were able to do some other stuff. But even like other sort of unanticipated consequences, right? We were there and we were watching the kids put on a little skit for us, which was actually about AIDS, which was sort of interesting. And then up come the police driving up in their trucks and telling us we have to all get in their trucks now and we're being taken away. And what had happened was the nearby community, who wasn't being benefited by this project, was jealous and told the government that we were foreign journalists there to spy on them.
Nice.
And so we got hauled off. The women of the community were shoving food all through the windows to try to make sure that we would have something, because in their experience we would not ever be seen again. Right? So we didn't have the the sort of the knowledge to know whether we should or shouldn't really be scared or worried about this. So we got to we got taken to a hotel parking lot, and when we got there, by the time we got there, unbeknownst to us, the secret police, who had been tailing us while we had been doing things with the community for the last 3 days, had convinced the regular police that we were in fact Rotarians and were not foreign journalists, and that we were trying to do a humanitarian project. So then we got released, happily, not otherwise. And that whole thing is just sort of like, wow, what just happened here? And then again, reflecting on that, not really being aware, even though we had internal folks, even though we had Rotarians in the other countries who said this project could work, who said they would help, there was just a whole constellation of reasons that made it really, really hard for it to be sustainable and successful. And so Rotary now has a much, much higher bar, which consequently has made it a lot more complicated to do these things. But partnering with something like Handwash has a lot greater likelihood of success because it's really, really been thought about carefully. It's got all the different key players are on board with it. And what they're doing is putting together global grants that we can then route funding to. We don't have to be responsible for the reporting. We don't have to be responsible for actually making the project happen, but we can be responsible and take part of the money that we are giving and using it to help support some of those really impactful international projects. I think the last thing I would just need to mention on behalf of our foundation is that there are many ways that you can give to the foundation. Of course, I think y'all are probably like our club where you're already getting a chance to regularly contribute through your dues structure. Is that
Yes,
the way
sir.
to do it? Okay, that way we do it as well. And I think when I was looking at the data, it looks like your club has 25 people who are already Paul Harris fellows. Those are folks who have given at least $1,000. And you've got 11 of you that are multiple Paul Harris fellows, which is for each level of $1,000 as you go up. There are a couple of other things that you may or may not know about, though, that I'd like to at least raise awareness of. One of them is called the Quest Society and or the Benefactor. And I think you've got a couple of people who are listed as benefactors, but this is the easiest way to support the foundation, in my opinion, because nothing happens until you die. And then when you die, as Pastor Governor Gary Moore said, at least that'll give your significant other something else to cry about other than you being gone, because you've given away some of your money to the Rotary Foundation. And so what's going on with that is, if you agree to leave at least $1,000 in your will, then you get considered a benefactor. If you agree to leave at least $10,000, then you are considered part of the Bequest Society. And I don't know about y'all, but I am really hoping and expecting that by the time I die, my estate is not going to miss either of those amounts. Right? So I'm hoping that I have a long and productive life ahead of me to raise a lot of money and to be able to leave some of that. So I would encourage you. It's also reversible. So like if you do it and there's financial hardship, Rotary Foundation is not going to come with a crowbar and try to collect that from your widow or widow. So, but it is a great way to sort of build in a legacy gift to be able to support the foundation. And of course, we also have many people in our district who have agreed to do $1,000 a year to the Rotary Foundation, which makes them part of what's called the Paul Harris Society, which is again promising to do that every year. So you can certainly think about that. I would also just mention, y'all have the end of year coming up, and that's often a time where clubs use their foundation giving points that they've accrued from the cash that you give to be able to also make designations. So you can also name people Paul Harris Fellows without it having to always be a cash on the barrelhead contribution. Obviously, the foundation benefits from the cash, but you also get a 1-to-1 point match for making your club gives money to polio and things like that you can then use to be able to designate people. And they don't even have to be Rotarians. You can designate if there are people in the community that you want to recognize or honor, or spouses or other things like that. Last thing I'll mention is probably most of us carry more than one credit card, right? So you may or may not know, let's see if I can find this here, but the Rotary Foundation has its own agreement to have a Rotary branded credit card. And so I've had one of these for a number of years. It's sort of cool because when you're just spending on whatever you happen to be spending on, the Rotary Foundation is getting, I guess, like maybe 0.5% or something, some minuscule amount of the transaction. Instead of going back to like your cash rewards or something like that, it's going to the Rotary Foundation. And the foundation has received almost $9 million through people just carrying Rotary branded credit cards in the last since 2000. So I happen to use that, you know, when I'm paying for Rotary registrations and things like that. I think that's probably a good way to sort of double the impact of that.
Dr. Matthews, our friends online wanted to know what was the last 4 digits of your social.
I'll bet they did. We'll just make that in. So with that, again, you know, thank you for the support that you do provide to the Rotary Foundation. Thank you for being involved in Rotary. And again, you know, I encourage you to consider continuing to be a financial supporter, but also more importantly, continuing to think about what is it that I'm putting into Rotary, because that's going to be what I'm going to be able to get back out, not just financially, but also in terms of why we even come together each week, what it is we're doing, and how we're doing good in the community, but also around the world. So with that, I'm going to be quiet temporarily and see if there are questions or other things that y'all want to comment about